Well, welcome everybody to Resurrection Sunday. We've made it through 8 of these podcasts.
That's right.
We're very excited. It's been awesome going through all of these.
I know it's been fun doing this shorter kind of quick fire format.
Yeah, so we're thankful for those of you who have kind of been through all 8 days of Holy Week with us, or for those of you who are just joining us, welcome.
Welcome.
You know, for a lot of people, Resurrection Sunday is the one they're going to listen to.
That's right.
I don't blame you.
Yeah, this is the day that Jesus rose from the dead.
Let's go.
And we're going to talk about it.
We're
This
gonna
is
talk about it.
the reason anybody anywhere is a Christian.
Yes, that's right. If he wasn't, we would be pitied above
I
all
was
men.
trying to phrase this as in the most blunt way as possible. It's like there once was a Jewish man, first century Jewish man, who is the only person in human history to have died and then risen from the dead.
Mm-hmm.
And during his life, he claimed to be the king over everything and to be God himself. And then he proved it by raising from the dead.
Right.
That's why I'm a Christian.
Yes.
And I'm like,
yep.
That specificity
Yep.
was helpful for me in a way I haven't thought about in a while. I'm like,
yeah.
A first century Jewish man claimed he was God and then proved it by rising from the dead. That's why I think he's the king.
Yep.
And that's why I live my life according to his laws.
Right. Yeah. Someone asked me pretty recently, why are you a Christian?
Yeah.
You know, or why do you believe in God, or
Yes.
any of those kind of apologetic based questions, and they all come back to this day for me.
Right.
It's because Jesus rose from the dead.
Right.
I believe in that historical fact.
Yes.
And everything hinges on that. And I think the apostles agree. Like when you talk about, or when you look at the ministry of the early church in Acts, what they focus on most is the resurrection and ascension of Jesus.
Yes.
As proof positive of the gospel message.
Yes.
It's not Good Friday, although they talk about it. It's not, but it's Resurrection Sunday.
It is fascinating, and it completes the story that we began on Palm Sunday, where Jesus rides into Jerusalem like a rival king and a rival high priest, coming to tear down and build a new kingdom and build a new temple in himself. And on Resurrection Sunday, he proves he has the authority to claim the destruction of those things.
Yep.
And he actually is what he claimed to be. He is actually the king who could bring life from death. He is actually the king who's the new temple offering forgiveness through his body and the new sacrifice that gives life to all people. He is everything he's claimed to be.
Right. On Resurrection Sunday, Jesus proves he is who he said he was.
That's right.
Okay.
That's right.
I like that.
Yeah.
And so it's interesting. I think a lot of times we're already starting to reframe a bit of Easter, a bit of Resurrection Sunday from what people probably tend to normally associate with this day. And I'm not saying those normal associations are bad.
Right.
But normally what I would hear on an Easter sermon is death is defeated.
Yeah. And
which
that
is
true.
I mean, some of the best news on planet Earth. Not belittling that in any way. And it's 100% true. But what we've been tracking through Holy Week, Jesus wasn't talking a lot about what he was going to do to death, you know. What he was talking about was, and what he was demonstrating was that he has the authority to be the king of his people and of all nations. Mm-hmm. And so what we're going to try to focus in on today, I think, as we look at Resurrection Sunday in light of all of Holy Week, is resurrection as the enthronement of a king.
Mm-hmm. That's
okay.
Right. Yes.
So let's talk about that.
Yeah.
The Sunday morning comes.
Yeah.
And women arrive at the tomb.
Yeah. And they see the stone has been rolled away.
Yeah.
And they walk inside. There's an angel there, a young man, depending on your translation, and he says, he is not here.
Yeah.
He is risen. Go and tell the disciples.
Right. Which is a really good formula to remember, because it's going to get repeated several times.
Yeah.
That he's not here. Or he is risen.
He is risen.
Go and tell.
Go and tell.
Yeah.
And that is really interesting to keep in mind as I was studying for this day. It's like that's kind of the thrust of everything that happens after this point. Jesus will appear and the disciples go and tell.
Yep. And so let's back up real quick and just give a little historical background to why that formula is so important.
Okay.
Because it follows what was the traditional way that kings were enthroned in the time of Rome.
Okay.
So a king, like a new Caesar, would be enthroned, and as soon as that would happen, a proclamation would go out.
A gospel.
Exactly. A gospel. A euangelion would go out. That is where the term came from, was the news of an enthroned king. I have a euangelion. Caesar Augustus has taken the throne.
Yes.
So a king is enthroned, and the gospel goes out to all the inhabited lands that Caesar Augustus is king. But now there is a dead Jewish man who's risen from the grave, and there's a new gospel being proclaimed that he is king of the whole world, and all authority has been given to him. Therefore, go and tell that Jesus is king. Like
it's big deal.
That's the message that's happening. Deal. So we talked about on Good Friday. We talked about the cross as a type of kingly enthronement. Right? Jesus gets a crown, he gets a royal robe, he gets a scepter, and he's raised up on the cross like a king would be raised up onto a throne. And what was tinged on that day with irony and sarcasm, mockery, because it was a crown, but it was a crown of thorns. Right? It was a throne, but it was really a cross. Today, all of those foreshadows are made real. Yeah. So Jesus rises from the dead. How is that a kingly enthronement? Why are we talking about kingship, ascension? Right. Why are we talking about those topics in resurrection if people are unfamiliar with this idea?
Well, I think the reason why we're talking about it is because that's the story that Jesus has been telling and the gospel writers have been telling up to this point. And so it's been leading the crucifixion as this type of coronation enthronement ceremony. But he dies. So you need a point where like, okay, but if the king is dead, that means the powers that be are the most powerful in the land. The way you know how powerful a king is by the strength and power of the enemies they defeat. He claimed to be a king. And then Rome and the religious establishment proved they were more powerful than him.
They had the bigger stick.
So what then? So when Jesus rises from the dead, and why that's significant, I think we've talked about it a few times here, is like death is a weapon. It's the tool of empires. It's the tool of establishments to coerce behavior or to make people conform. So they use the one weapon, the biggest weapon they have, killing people. They use it, and it doesn't work. So if you have a king, a rival king,
who can't die,
he is more powerful than you.
Because every king has lost the war against death.
Every king has lost the war against death. And every other empire that gets another king to die wins and takes over their kingdom.
Until they die.
But if death becomes irrelevant.
If it's no longer the threat against the kingdom.
Then that king must rule forever.
Everything forever.
That's right.
He wins.
Hands down. And that's why this is it's a vindication of everything he said and proof positive that he is the king over all empires and powers.
Because in the resurrection, he is the king who went to war against death and won.
That's right.
Okay. That's really cool. So what happens after the women see Jesus and are told to go and tell? What else do we need to focus on for this day?
They go and tell the disciples, who come and look for themselves. When they don't believe the women, but when it's confirmed to them, they get kind of freaked out and they start telling other people to some extent. And then that pattern keeps getting repeated. Jesus appears to 500 people. He appears to 11. He appears to 12 disciples. He appears to a whole bunch of people. Proving that he is everything that we've been talking about.
And so there's this formula that continues where people hear the message that Jesus is risen, and then they go and tell. They hear the news that the king has taken the throne, and they go and proclaim that gospel.
And the best place to kind of just land this plane is the very end of Matthew's gospel, Matthew 28.
Which is days later,
Days later. But it's Jesus resurrected from the dead. He's done his appearing ministry after his death. But he sums it up when he's speaking to his disciples, and he makes a kingly claim. He says, all authority in heaven and on earth has been given to me. Therefore, go and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them into my death and teaching them my ways. That's the way the Gospel of Matthew ends. It's the announcement that God is king over all things and that the world is being invited into his kingdom to abide by his laws and his ways.
I mean, it is amazing that claim when you put political and kingly lenses on, and he says all authority, every throne, every dynasty, every empire, every little country, all authority has been given to me, right? On earth, but also in heaven.
Yes.
He is King of kings, of kings of kings.
Yeah. And there's a sense in which like God is giving his divine power.
Yeah.
I mean, God and Jesus are the same, but there's a sense in which like Jesus is being given the authority on earth because he's triumphed over it.
Right.
He must be given it. No one can defeat him. He's been given authority.
Right.
But God is also giving him the throne at his right hand to rule with him.
Yeah. And so he's the king, but a king without citizens isn't really a king.
Right.
That's just a loner with some land.
Yeah.
That's a loner with land. That's not a king.
Right.
You need citizens. You need people under you, subjects.
Yeah.
And I think you can also, in the same way that you can see the power of a king by the kinds of enemies he overcomes, you can also see the effectiveness or the wisdom of a king by the effectiveness of his citizens. Like how judicious is he in creating a just society?
Yeah, that's right.
Like are his citizens good people?
Right. Yeah.
Like what are they doing? And so it is cool. He says, okay, I got all authority. I'm the King of Kings of Kings. I'm the one. Now go. And he gives a citizen commission to his people. And so much is happening in that moment.
A lot's happening.
A lot is happening. On one level, you have the commission from the Garden of Eden finally coming back. Adam and Eve were told to be fruitful and multiply. Yeah. And they failed at that mission, and we've been failing since.
Yeah.
And now we can be fruitful and multiply again, but not just through biology, but now we can tell the good news about Jesus and invite all nations, not just Jews, into this new multi-ethnic family of Jesus.
And another way that story is elevated is in the Garden of Eden. God was with Adam and Eve.
Right.
He walked with them, but when Jesus says, all authority has been given to me, and I am with you always.
Right.
He's not just with his disciples in an analogous way he was to Adam and Eve, where he was separate from them.
Yeah.
Right. He lives in his disciples.
Yeah.
The Garden of Eden travels with them.
Wow.
They are, Peter says, they're living stones of a new temple, and wherever they go and make new disciples, new temples, new gardens are being constructed.
And then you know a little bit more about this than I do because you taught it to me, so let me just tee you up for it. There's something else really interesting happening in Matthew 28 and the Great Commission, Jesus sending, is Jesus is repeating what happened at the end of Chronicles too, the end of the Hebrew Bible. Talk about that, because that's really fascinating.
Yeah, the very last words of the book of 2 Chronicles, which is the very last words of the Hebrew ordering of what we call the Old Testament, is King Cyrus proclaiming that the Jewish people should leave exile and go back to their homeland and rebuild their temple. And he basically says, all authority in heaven and earth has been given to me. Therefore, go and rebuild your temple.
Right.
So Matthew
is riffing on that.
And Jesus says the same thing. I am the king sending out my people to build a new temple in all the earth.
It's so cool.
And so he's completing, and then another way to say that is he's completing the history of God's people, or continuing it into a new era.
Right.
We are God's new phase of his people, bringing about his kingdom, bringing about his temple in all the earth.
And so now, so then Jesus gives that commission, right?
Yeah.
And then he ascends, right? And I think that is so important.
Flies up in the clouds.
Right, because I think that's all people think about is like, whoa, cool, magic trick. Or is like, no, what's most important here is that he's taking his throne.
That's right.
An ascent in this context is a coronated and crowned king going to take his throne and begin his reign.
That's right.
And so when Jesus ascends, he's beginning his reign.
Yeah.
And so now, and that reign has extended to this point today, that Jesus still reigns. He still has all authority. And now we are his sent citizens, completing and continuing the story of his people that he's been telling from the beginning.
Yeah.
We get to go hear that Jesus has been raised from the dead, and we get to proclaim the good news that he is king.
That's right.
So we're continuing the story that began on Resurrection Sunday.
Yeah.
We heard that he is risen, and we tell the good news.
Feeding into a little bit of this, the other themes we're talking about is like the necessity of death in providing life. in that mission, we're also given a confidence that we're not given guarantees it'll be easy,
right?
But we are given confidences that even if that mission ends in our death brings new life.
Right.
Like our lives are generatively fruitful, even when we die.
Right.
Or even as we die, sacrificing ourselves for others.
Yeah.
So there's no sense in which this Christian mission, this going and telling, can fail.
Right.
Because even the death of people proclaiming the gospel is another way the gospel is proclaimed.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. That's really good. And I think it would be really appropriate for us to land the plane here on the final resurrection. There will be a final day of resurrection.
Yes.
There will be a resurrection Sunday. I don't know if it'll happen on a Sunday, but there will be a resurrection day when Jesus, the King, comes back.
Yeah.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
He
comes back to earth.
Comes back to earth, and all the dead will be raised.
Mm-hmm.
And we will live in his kingdom forever. Those who have put their fealty toward King Jesus will be brought into his kingdom to live with him forever. And
that kingdom built on the precept of life rather than death, where healing and miracle wine and life from the dead was the thing of his ministry, will be our reality forever.
Yeah,
like the special incidents that we get, like, you made water from wine?
Right.
No, that's the normal reality.
Just go down to that river. It's full of wine. Yeah, that's amazing. And so I think that's also what Resurrection Sunday kind of just like pulls me toward.
It's like, oh, this will happen for real one day soon.
That I'll get a Resurrection Sunday.
Yeah.
It's not just something I look back to.
Yeah.
It's something I look forward to. Like, it's something that I actually get to join in on.
Yeah.
That I'm like, even though I die, I will be raised. And when I open my eyes, I'm going to see Jesus, my King, in this new resurrected world. Like, and that's another thing. Like, the world, creation will experience a Resurrection Sunday.
Yeah.
Right? And so there's just so much
you can keep going
to go on, but it's just so good. I've loved this journey through Holy Week. And I think what I'm taking away from it, be curious what you're taking away from it too. I think what I'm taking away from it is just how soaked in kingship this week is.
Yeah.
That Jesus wants to claim authority over all the rival kingdoms and religious establishments that I think are better, or that we think will save us, or that we want to trust in. And he claims authority over them and shows how they're insufficient, and is calling us to put all our trust and confidence in him, his upside down kingdom, his death, and his resurrection.
Yeah.
What about you? What do you take? Anything else? What do you?
That was a big thing, and then I think there's smaller things like throughout. I'm like, oh, the mercy seat.
Yeah.
Caiaphas would have gone to the mercy seat and offer anyway, like smaller things like that, which we talked about throughout. But I was really impacted and helped by this idea that Jesus has been proclaiming to be a king for a whole week, intentionally causing his own death so that he could be proven to be the king of life and death, more powerful than anything in the world.
Yeah.
It's a big deal.
It's a big deal. Well, that has been Holy Week. 8 days.
8 days.
8 days. It's been really awesome. Happy Easter, everybody. Happy Resurrection Sunday.
Yeah.
Thank you for joining us on this.
Thank you so much.
If this is your first exposure to Spoken Gospel or the Spoken Gospel podcast, we release free content all the time. We have introductions to every book of the Bible. We have devotional teachings on every chapter of Scripture. And then Seth and I sit down and have podcasts like this, going deep into different sections and books of the Bible. So we invite you to check it out on SpokenGospel.com, Spoken Gospel Podcast, or wherever. All the places.
And if you joined us halfway through this Holy Week podcasting mini-series, next week we'll be posting all of these episodes together in one video and on one audio format.
So you can binge it.
Binge it if you desire.
Yes. So thank you guys for joining us on Resurrection Sunday, and we will see you next time.
Thank you for listening to the Spoken Gospel Podcast. Spoken Gospel creates short films, devotionals, and podcasts like this one. Everything we make is free because of generous supporters like you. To see our resources, visit spokengospel.com or subscribe to our YouTube channel. Thanks for listening. See you next time.